You know, people often say that when a relationship ends, you see someone's true face. But I never expected to see the kind of darkness I saw in my ex. My name is Clara, and this is the story of how my ex carefully planned what he thought was the perfect revenge against me, but how karma, in the most unexpected way, was faster than both of us. I met Ethan when I was 22. I had just graduated fresh into my first job, and honestly, I was naive. He had that kind of charm that could fill up a room, tall, confident, that effortless smile. When he walked into a cafe, people noticed. And when he noticed me, I thought my world had changed. For the first few months, everything was like a dream. The dates, the late-night calls, the little surprises, he seemed too good to be true. And maybe that should have been my first warning. But at that time, I was so caught up in the whirlwind of being in love that I ignored the tiny cracks. Like how he always had to be the center of attention, or how he would twist conversations to make me feel guilty for things I hadn't even done. He was the kind of person who could turn an argument into a courtroom trial, and somehow, I was always the one apologizing. Still, I stayed, because love makes you blind, right? But here's the thing about people like Ethan: they can't hide their true selves forever. Slowly, the mask slipped. He started getting jealous, possessive. If a guy at work even looked at me, Ethan would sulk for days. If I didn't text him back within minutes, he'd accuse me of ignoring him. I remember the night it all started unraveling. We were at dinner with some friends, and he made a joke about how I wasn't really that smart, just lucky. Everyone laughed awkwardly, but inside I felt something crack. That was the first time I thought, maybe he doesn't love me. Maybe he loves controlling me. But leaving him, that was a whole different battle, because Ethan wasn't the type to let go quietly. When I finally broke up with him, I thought the hard part was over. I thought I'd cry, heal, and move on. I thought he'd just disappear like most exes do. I couldn't have been more wrong. Because Ethan didn't just want closure. He wanted revenge. And not just the petty kind, no, he wanted something so big, so destructive, that I'd never recover. But what he didn't know, what he could never have predicted, was that karma had already set its eyes on him. And by the end of this story, you'll see exactly how his perfect plan fell apart before it even began. When I broke up with Ethan, I thought the worst was over. Honestly, I believed the hardest part would be dealing with my own heartbreak, untangling myself from someone I once thought I'd marry. But the truth was, the breakup was just the beginning. Ethan wasn't the kind of person to simply walk away and lick his wounds. His pride wouldn't let him. Deep down, I think he saw me leaving as a kind of humiliation, as if I had stolen his control and dented his carefully polished image. And to Ethan, nothing was worse than looking like the loser. At first, I noticed the warning signs in little things. A week after the breakup, he sent me a long string of texts, half desperate apologies, half threats. "We can fix this, Clara. You just need to admit you were wrong. Don't forget, I know things about you, things other people wouldn't like to hear. If you walk away now, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." I blocked him. I thought that would be the end of it. But Ethan was persistent. He made new numbers, new social media accounts. Sometimes the messages would come late at night. "I saw you today. You looked lonely." Other times, they were filled with venom. "You'll never find someone who loves you like I did." It was unsettling, yes, but I still thought, he'll get tired eventually. He'll move on. I had no idea how wrong I was. Because Ethan wasn't planning on moving on. He was planning on getting even. The first sign came at work. I walked into the office one morning, and immediately I could sense something was off. The usual buzz of chatter quieted when I entered. My colleagues, people who had always been warm and friendly, suddenly seemed hesitant, their eyes darting toward me before quickly looking away. I brushed it off at first, thinking maybe I was imagining it. But then Jenna, my closest friend at the company, pulled me aside into a conference room. "Clara," she said, her voice low, "is everything okay between you and Ethan?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" Jenna hesitated before finally blurting it out. "There's a rumor going around. People are saying you cheated on Ethan with our boss." My jaw dropped. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. What? That's insane. Where would anyone even get that idea? Jenna looked uncomfortable. I don't know, but it's spreading fast. And Clara, people are saying Ethan's been telling people he has proof. Proof of something that never even happened. That's when it hit me. Ethan was behind this. He had planted the rumor deliberately, carefully choosing the kind of lie that could hurt me the most. He knew how much I valued my career. He knew my boss was respected, married, and someone I admired. By tying my name to his, Ethan wasn't just trying to humiliate me personally. He was trying to cast doubt on my integrity as a professional. I spent that entire day with my stomach in knots, terrified that my boss would call me in and demand an explanation. I avoided the break room, avoided eye contact, and prayed it would blow over. But Ethan had always been meticulous. He didn't let things blow over. Within a week, I found myself receiving subtle, awkward questions from colleagues. Things like, "So, how did you land this job, Clara?" With a smirk that made it clear they were fishing for confirmation. I wanted to scream. I wanted to march straight to Ethan's apartment and demand he stop. But I knew him well enough to realize that would only make things worse. Ethan thrived on reactions. He wanted me rattled. He wanted me to fight him so he could twist it into more ammunition. So I tried to stay silent. I thought if I ignored him long enough, he'd get bored and stop. But silence wasn't the weapon I thought it was. To Ethan, my lack of response was an invitation to push harder. The second wave of his revenge hit me where I least expected it, at home. One evening, I got a call from my landlord. He sounded hesitant, almost apologetic. "Clara, I don't mean to pry," he said, "but I've been hearing some things. Someone told me you've been struggling with money, possibly because of a drug problem." I almost dropped the phone. A drug problem. He cleared his throat awkwardly. "I didn't believe it, but you understand, I had to check. I need to know my tenants are stable." That's when my blood ran cold. Ethan wasn't just targeting my reputation at work anymore. He was going after my entire life. My home, my security. He was planting seeds of doubt wherever he could, trying to isolate me, weaken me, and push me into a corner. And I'll admit it, it worked. For a while, I was terrified. Every time my phone rang, I braced myself for more bad news. Every time I saw coworkers whispering, I wondered if they were talking about me. I started withdrawing, second-guessing myself, living in constant fear of the next blow. But here's the thing about people like Ethan. Their arrogance makes them sloppy. One night, Jenna called me. I could hear the laughter in her voice as soon as I picked up. "You won't believe what just happened," she said. Apparently, she'd been at a mutual friend's party, where Ethan showed up with a new girl. And in true Ethan fashion, he couldn't resist bragging. He started boasting about how he had taught his ex a lesson, and how he was destroying her life piece by piece. He even claimed he was smarter than Karma. But here, where it backfired, the girl he was bragging to, she wasn't impressed. In fact, she was disgusted. She pulled out her phone, recorded him mid-rant, and later shared the clip online. By the next morning, Ethan's revenge wasn't just my problem anymore, it was his. People started seeing him for what he really was, vindictive, obsessive, and cruel. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. It was as if the universe had stepped in, giving me a glimpse of the justice I desperately needed. But Ethan wasn't finished, not even close. Because while his reputation started to take a hit, he was already plotting his next move. Something bigger, something riskier, something that wouldn't just chip away at my life, it would threaten to sabotage my entire future. And that was when things turned truly dangerous. I used to think heartbreak was the worst pain a person could endure. That hollow ache in your chest when you realize someone you trusted doesn't love you anymore. But what Ethan put me through, it wasn't heartbreak. It was war. After the rumors at work and the lies about my personal life, I expected him to eventually lose steam. I kept telling myself, he'll get tired, he'll move on. But instead, Ethan escalated. The first sign was subtle, almost laughably petty. My car. One morning, I walked outside to drive to work, and there it was, 3 long, deliberate scratches carved into the driver's side door. At first, I thought maybe it had been a random act of vandalism, but then I saw the note tucked under my windshield wiper. It was a single sheet of paper, folded once. Inside, in his unmistakable handwriting, were 3 words. Still watching Clara. My blood ran cold. He wasn't hiding anymore. He wanted me to know. He wanted me afraid. And it worked. That day, I couldn't concentrate at work. My hands trembled every time I typed. I found myself glancing out the office windows, half expecting to see him lurking across the street. When I got home, I double-checked every lock. I even pushed a chair under the doorknob like I used to do when I was a kid and scared of monsters. But this wasn't childhood fear. This was real. This was Ethan. I wanted to go to the police. God, I wanted to so badly. But then the voice of doubt whispered in my head, what if they don't believe you? What if he finds out you went to them and retaliates harder? So, like an idiot, I stayed quiet. That silence gave Ethan room to get bolder. 2 weeks later, I was at work when my boss called me into his office. My stomach clenched. I thought this was it, that the rumors had finally poisoned his view of me. But when I walked in, he looked concerned, not angry. "Clara," he said gently, "are you sure everything's all right at home?" I frowned. "Yes, why?" He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "Because someone sent me an email from an anonymous address. It included pictures of you. At least they looked like you, but they were compromising." I froze, my throat went dry. "Pictures? What kind of pictures?" He cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable. "Intimate ones, explicit. I didn't believe they were real, but I thought you should know." My knees nearly buckled. I managed to choke out, "They're not real, they're fake. I swear to you they're fake." He nodded quickly. "I believe you. But Clara, whoever is doing this, they're trying to hurt you, to damage your reputation. You need to be careful." As I left his office, my hands shook so violently I could barely open the door. Fake photos. Ethan had created fake photos of me and tried to use them to ruin me. That night, I cried harder than I had in years. It wasn't just about the photos, or the rumors, or the scratches on my car. It was about the realization that Ethan wasn't going to stop. He wasn't content with making me uncomfortable. He wanted to destroy me. But here's the thing about reaching your lowest point. Sometimes it flips a switch. I woke up the next morning with puffy eyes and a pounding headache, but also with a new kind of clarity. I couldn't keep living like this, looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next blow. If Ethan was going to war with me, then I had 2 choices, hide or fight. And I was done hiding. So I started documenting everything. Every text, every strange phone call, every rumor, every detail of every conversation. I even photographed the scratches on my car and saved the creepy note he left behind. If Ethan thought he was the only one capable of playing a long game, he was about to learn otherwise. But before I could put any kind of plan into motion, karma beat me to it. The unraveling began in the most unexpected way. It started with his job. Ethan worked in finance, an industry where reputation is everything. For years, he had crafted this image of being reliable, charming, even trustworthy. But when that video of him bragging about teaching me a lesson circulated, it reached people he didn't expect, his colleagues. At first, they brushed it off as drunken boasting, but then small things started to surface. A discrepancy in one of his reports, a deal that didn't quite add up, whispers of questionable behavior. Suddenly, Ethan wasn't the golden boy anymore. And when people lose faith in someone, they start looking closer. I didn't know the details at the time, but I'd later learned that his bosses began auditing his work, double-checking everything. And Ethan, cocky, arrogant Ethan, had left a trail of mistakes and lies so wide it was impossible to ignore. While he was busy trying to ruin me, he hadn't noticed he was sabotaging himself. But of course, in the moment, I didn't know all of this was happening behind the scenes. What I did know was that Ethan was starting to slip. He grew sloppier in his harassment. He sent texts without covering his tracks. He showed up at places I frequented, glaring from across the room, daring me to react. And each time, instead of fear, I felt something new: power. Because now I wasn't just the victim, I was the witness. I had proof, and proof was dangerous for him. The turning point came one night when I was leaving a late meeting at work. The parking lot was nearly empty, the kind of setting that would normally set my nerves on edge. Sure enough, as I approached my car, I saw him leaning against it, arms crossed, a smirk plastered on his face. "Clara," he drawled as if we were old friends. "Long day." I froze, but then steadied my voice. "What do you want, Ethan?" He shrugged. "Just to talk, to remind you that you made a mistake. You walked away from the best thing you'll ever have. And now, well, I think you're starting to see the consequences." Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe it was anger, maybe it was both. But instead of shrinking back, I pulled out my phone, hit record, and held it up so he could see. "Keep talking," I said coldly. For a moment, his mask slipped. His smirk faltered, and I saw the flash of panic in his eyes. He muttered something under his breath, shoved off my car, and stormed away into the night. That was the moment I knew the tide was turning. Ethan wasn't invincible. He wasn't untouchable. And for the first time since our breakup, I believed, truly believed, that karma was real. I didn't know exactly how it would happen yet, but I could feel it in my bones. Ethan's empire of lies was about to collapse. And when it did, it wouldn't just crush him, it would free me. I didn't notice it all at once. At first, it was little things, like how he stopped dressing as sharply as before. His tailored suits gave way to wrinkled shirts. The perfect hair that he used to style religiously now looked greasy, unkempt. He looked human, tired, angry. And then I started hearing whispers. It began with a colleague casually mentioning, "Hey, did you hear Ethan's firm is under investigation?" I tried to act nonchalant, but my heart hammered in my chest. Investigation? For what? I didn't press. Instead, I waited. And sure enough, karma delivered. A few weeks later, one of Ethan's old friends, someone who had distanced himself after realizing just how toxic Ethan was, called me. "Clara," he said, voice low, almost conspiratorial. "You won't believe this. Ethan's in deep trouble. Apparently those shady deals he bragged about, his bosses found out. There's talk of fraud. He might even lose his license." I nearly dropped my phone. Fraud. The golden boy of finance, the man who once gloated about his perfect career, was now standing on quicksand. And as if that weren't enough, karma hit his personal life just as hard. Remember those fake photos he made of me? The disgusting, fabricated images he tried to spread around? Well, one of them somehow ended up circulating among his circle of friends. Only, this time, people weren't laughing at me, they were horrified by him. "Who does something like that?" one of his ex-friends scoffed online. "Creating fake photos of your ex, that's not just petty, that's sick." The reputation he had built, charming, confident, trustworthy, was shattering in real time. And unlike me, Ethan didn't know how to rebuild. Still, he tried. Oh, he tried. He kept stalking me, kept showing up, kept pushing. Almost like he thought if he could break me completely, it would somehow save him. But the cracks in his armor were showing. One night, I was out with a friend when Ethan stumbled into the same bar. He was drunk, loud, slurring his words. He saw me across the room and staggered over, knocking over someone's drink in the process. "Clara," he shouted, ignoring the angry patron cursing at him. "Clara, tell them I'm not the bad guy." The whole bar turned to look. I felt a strange mix of pity and triumph. This wasn't the suave manipulator who once orchestrated elaborate schemes. This was a man unraveling. "Go home, Ethan," I said calmly. He blinked at me, confusion flashing across his face. Then his expression twisted into rage. "This is your fault. You ruined me." But here, the truth, I didn't ruin him. He ruined himself. And the world was finally seeing it. The final blow came in the most unexpected way. A month later, I got a knock on my door. It was a woman I didn't recognize, tall, confident, with an expression that was equal parts exhausted and furious. "Are you Clara?" she asked. I nodded cautiously. "Yes." "I'm Emily," she said flatly. Ethan's girlfriend, or I guess ex-girlfriend now. I froze. Ethan had a girlfriend. Apparently so. She sighed. Look, I know this is weird, me showing up here, but I thought you should know. He tried the same crap with me. The lies, the manipulation, the threats. I found messages, fake accounts he used to warn me about you. He was obsessed with making you look like some monster. But when I dug deeper, well, I realized the monster was him. Her voice cracked on that last word, and for the first time, I saw myself in her. Another woman caught in Ethan's web, clawing her way out. Thank you for telling me, I said softly. She nodded. I'm not just telling you, I'm telling everyone. I already sent what I found to his job, to the authorities, to his family. I'm done covering for him. And just like that, the final domino tipped. Within weeks, Ethan lost his job. The investigation into his fraudulent activities turned up evidence that couldn't be ignored. His company cut ties with him publicly, painting him as a lone bad actor to save their own reputation. Socially, he was radioactive. Friends abandoned him. Family distanced themselves. The girlfriend who had once believed his lies was now one of his loudest accusers. And me, for the first time in months, I breathed freely. But the universe wasn't done with him yet. The last time I saw Ethan, it wasn't in a bar or in a parking lot or outside my apartment. It was on the news. A local channel ran a segment about his downfall, former finance star under fire for fraud and harassment allegations. His mugshot flashed across the screen, and I swear I barely recognized him. Hollow eyes, unshaven face, a shell of the man he once pretended to be. And that's when it hit me. Karma hadn't just caught up to him, it had lapped him. For every lie he told, every cruel trick he played, every attempt to break me down, Karma handed him something worse. He thought he was scripting the perfect revenge story, but life had a different script, and in that version, Ethan wasn't the mastermind. He was the cautionary tale. And me, I was the survivor. When Ethan's mugshot hit the news, people started calling me. Old classmates, distant cousins, even colleagues who had once whispered about me behind my back. Clara, one said, you were right about him all along. Funny how quickly people switch sides once the truth comes out. But I didn't need their apologies. I didn't need their validation. Because by then, I had already learned the most important truth of all. I never needed Ethan, or anyone like him, to define who I was. For months, I had lived in his shadow, terrified of his next move, bracing for the next rumor, the next ambush. He made me feel small. But watching his empire of lies crumble piece by piece, I realized something profound. He wasn't powerful. He was desperate. And desperate people always reveal themselves in the end. After the scandal, Ethan disappeared from my life completely. No more late-night knocks, no more fake accounts sending me venom. Just silence. At first, the silence was eerie. I kept expecting him to show up again like some ghost that wouldn't rest. But he didn't. He couldn't. His downfall was so public, so total, that he no longer had the resources or the audience for his games. And me, I started living again. I poured my energy into my art, the thing I had abandoned during those chaotic months. Brushstrokes became therapy, colors became words I couldn't say out loud. And slowly, those paintings started attracting attention. Not the cruel, mocking kind Ethan had once spread about me, but genuine appreciation. People saw me in them, not his version of me. Then one day, I was invited to showcase my work at a local gallery. The irony wasn't lost on me. Months earlier, I had been terrified to even show my face in public, and now my art was on display for strangers to admire. Opening night, as I stood surrounded by canvases that felt like pieces of my soul, I overheard someone whisper, "That's Clara, the one who went through hell with that guy. Look at her now. Look at me now." That became my mantra. Every time doubt crept in, every time a memory threatened to drag me backward, I reminded myself, look at me now. I survived. I thrived. But karma, it seemed, wasn't quite finished with Ethan. Months later, I learned through mutual contacts that he had filed for bankruptcy. His fraud scandal had left him unemployable in finance, and his reputation was so poisoned that even smaller firms refused to touch him. He bounced from odd jobs, living in a cramped apartment that was a far cry from the luxury condo he once bragged about. The man who once orchestrated grand schemes to control others was now struggling to control his own life. And yet I didn't gloat. I thought I would. I thought I'd feel triumphant seeing him fall so far. But when I finally saw him again, by accident at a dingy coffee shop, I felt something unexpected. Pity. He was sitting alone at a corner table, hunched over, wearing clothes that looked like they hadn't been washed in days. His hands shook as he lifted a chipped mug to his lips. When his eyes met mine across the room, there was no malice, no arrogance, just emptiness. He quickly looked away, and I walked past without a word. Because the real victory wasn't in watching him crumble. The real victory was in knowing that he no longer had any power over me. He had tried to make me his villain, his punchline, his casualty. But in the end, I was the one with a future. I sold my first painting not long after, then another, and another. Eventually, the gallery offered me a full exhibition. The girl who once thought she was too broken to be seen was now celebrated for her vision, her resilience, her art. One night, standing in front of a canvas that had just sold for more than I used to make in a month, I smiled to myself. This was my revenge, not loud, not cruel, not orchestrated, just living, thriving, succeeding. Because here's the truth, karma doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's slow, but it's always certain. Ethan planned the perfect revenge, but karma was faster, sharper, and far more poetic than anything he could ever imagine. And me. I didn't just survive his game, I won it. By walking away, by building a life he could never touch, I wrote the ending he never saw coming. So if you ever find yourself in the middle of someone else's twisted game, remember this. You don't have to beat them at their own rules. Sometimes, all you have to do is let karma play. And it always, always plays to win.